Everyone has their favorite franchise, whether it's a book, game, movie, or TV show franchise. We all have one we praise to no end. Whether it helped us become the people we are now, or they were just really fun to us. For me, there's one franchise that I consider to be not only the greatest video game franchise of all time, but the greatest franchise to ever be created. This one series means more to me than any other series ever created. And that franchise is Candy Crush. Truly a magnificent series for the ages. Oh, also The Legend of Zelda is pretty good. Truth be told, I didn't really get into Zelda until later in my life. When it came to Nintendo, I was a Mario boy. That all changed when I played The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. I instantly fell in love with the game and the series it was a part of. So recently I decided to expand my Zelda knowledge by binge playing all the 3D entries in the series, starting with the one that started it all, Ocarina of Time. Ocarina of Time is the most acclaimed video game of all time. Going into playing it, my expectations were all over the place. I had no idea whether I would like it or not, and as a newcomer to the series who had only played one Zelda game, the Zelda game commonly known as the game that broke the conventions of the series and was very different than its predecessors, the linear style of Zelda was very foreign to me. So I played the game, and today I am here to relay my findings and opinions to you good folks. This review is going to be split up into multiple different sections, and timestamps for each section will be in the comments below. Now, let's get started on my review of The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. Please note, my first time playing Ocarina was on the Wii U Virtual Console system, so my review will be talking about that version of the game. I'll talk a little bit about the different controls of the Virtual Console, but for the most part, everything will be the same as the original N64 version of the game. Also, big spoiler warning, I will be talking about the ending of this game and many other parts, so if you don't want to be spoiled, click off this video now. Alright, let's get into this. Ocarina of Time was the very first 3D Zelda game, so it had to figure out how to transition the main staples of Zelda to this new environment. First off, movement was set to the right or middle stick, which was basically a more advanced version of the D-pad. The B buttons were used for sword swings, and the A button was used for other actions like rolling, backflips, and side jumps. The C buttons were used for items. On the Wii U Virtual Console, it was assigned to the left stick. But the new revolutionary addition to the controls was Z targeting. By pressing the Z or ZR button, the camera would lock on to any nearby enemies, and if there weren't any enemies around, pressing the button would cause the camera to face where Link was facing. This feature became a series staple, and it's been in every 3D Zelda since. It's an excellent way to transition the top-down view of the 2D Zelda to the new style. Z targeting feels very fluid. It's super easy to use, and I rarely ever lock on to something I don't want to. In fact, all the controls in this game feel very solid and quite easy to use. For an over 20-year-old game, the controls hold up very well. The visuals don't hold up as well, but they still have their charm. Most of the backgrounds in this game are made up of 2D pictures with some 3D models mixed in. The game runs at a measly 20 frames per second, which even at the time was pretty mediocre. It's stuff like this that makes the game feel super dated. There's some really cool visual elements. Character designs and animations are fun and expressive. Some textures look amazing, like the walls of Zora's domain reflecting the water off of their shiny surface, and the architecture of the builds in this game look fantastic. But I still think the world feels kind of ugly most of the time. The 3DS remake makes all these problems go away. Seriously, that game looks amazing. But the N64 version feels pretty dated due to the visuals. Overall, this game feels pretty great, and while it doesn't look all that good, the game still makes up for that in the content that lies within. Ocarina of Time takes place in the land of Hyrule, a vast and beautiful world that you can explore to your heart's content. The world is connected by a central area, Hyrule Field. Not gonna lie, it's pretty bare. All that there is here is Lon Lon Ranch in the middle and the entrances to all the other areas of the game. Hyrule Field is basically just used as a hub for all the other areas. You don't spend much time exploring that area. But luckily, the rest of the world is fun and filled with things to do. Each area has a unique attribute that sets it apart from the rest. There's Castletown, a vibrant town connected to the main castle, filled with fun and interesting characters. There's Kakariko Village, a quiet and peaceful village that gives you access to the towering Death Mountain, a giant volcano that houses the Gorons, a race of proud, strong rock people. There's Zora's Domain, the water cavern that is home to the dignified and pristine Zoras, a race of fish people. Kokiri Forest is the home of the main character, Link, and is home to the children of the forest. There's Lake Hylia, where you meet up the crazy lake researcher, and you go fishing there too. There's the Gerudo Desert, a huge wasteland that is home to the Gerudo, a group of woman thieves, and their leader Ganondorf, the king of evil. And so many more places, all of them brimming with personality. And personalities! Look at all these people! There's so many fun and interesting characters. It would be a true feat to name all of them. But I'll try. Link, Zelda, Navi, Epona, Ganondorf, Sheik, Saria, Darunia, Ruda, Impa, Nabora, the Deku Tree, Dampa the Gravedigger, Owldude, Zera King, Malon, Talon, Mido, Mr. Ingo, Granny, all the shop owners, the Poe Collector, Medigoron, Big Goron, the Happy Mask Salesman, Richard the Dog, the Poe Sisters, Kuma and Kutake, the Composer Brothers, Darklink, the Jugglers, the Dancing Couple, Bonnaroo, the Scarecrow, Cuckoo Lady, the Great Fairies, the Lake Scientist, Jabba Jabba and his belly, the Master Craftsman and his son, the Running Man, and the Skull Kid. I'm sure he's not important and definitely not planning to knock me out and steal my horse and or powerful musical instrument that helps him travel through time. There's so many characters and I didn't even name all of them. Some of them help you on your journey, some of them are just there to talk to you. And for some of the characters, there's two versions of them. The main part of the game is traveling through different timelines. One is in the present, and one is 7 years in the future, when the world has been taken over by Ganondorf. I'll talk about that more later, but now I'll just stick with the characters. Let's take Malon, for example. When you first meet her at Lon Lon Ranch as a child, she's just a little girl who likes to sing and play with the horses. She teaches you a song that can call the best horse on the ranch, Epona. She teaches you how to handle a horse, and then she sings for a while. 7 years later, you go back to the ranch, and everything has changed. Malon's father, Talon, was kicked off the ranch by Ganondorf, and replaced with the weird Mr. Luigi Ingo. Whatever, he's weird. Now, Malon is an adult, and she's basically a husk of her former self. She doesn't sing, and she's all sad due to the loss of control of the ranch. So you play the song she taught you, and the tune calls over the horse Epona. She sees you and remembers you as the boy from all those years ago. She's no longer in her state of depression. You've helped her, and you both grow from this experience. So after you beat Mr. Luigi Ingo in a horse race and kick him off the ranch is restored. Talon is back and he and his daughter are happy. The game is full of these interactions that usually help either the player or a character grow. All the major characters in this game grow up, and it's why I find it such an interesting game. The characters fill up the world and flesh it out, and not only do they provide an entertaining playthrough, but some of them give you side quests. Are they good? No, they're not. They're not good at all. The rewards are good, but the act of doing the side quests are tedious and pretty annoying. There are two major side quests, both of them being trading quests. First, the one with the best reward, and the better of the two quests, the Big Oron Sword quest. The Big Oron Sword is easily the best sword in the game, and the quest to get it is long and kind of annoying. Basically, you have to bring some random object to someone, and they give you another object. Luckily, they tell you who you have to give the object to, so it's not that difficult. And the reward is a must-have when playing this game. But then there's the mask trading side quest. To give you the Mask of Truth. The Mask of Truth lets you read animals' thoughts and gives you hints on where some secrets are. And to get it, you have to talk to someone by wearing the certain mask that corresponds with them. I don't think it's possible without a walkthrough. It's just so annoying. If you want to do a side quest in the game, just do the Big Oron Sword quest. So, yeah, that's the world of Hyrule. Or at least the skin and bones of it. But I think if we want to get into the meat of this game, we're gonna need to go deeper. At the heart of Ocarina of Time, and at the heart of the entire Zelda series, are the dungeons. They're your main objective throughout all the games, and they can either make or break the game. Luckily, Ocarina of Time has some of the best dungeons in the entire series. The first dungeon in the game is inside the Deku Tree, and it's an excellent first dungeon. It introduces many new mechanics and concepts not only to this game, but to Zelda in general. This was the first ever 3D Zelda dungeon, so it had to show off what 3D could bring to the series. This dungeon takes place inside a tree, and you traverse up and down the levels of the tree. Previous 2D dungeons couldn't really emulate vertical environments, but with 3D, it's easy peasy. The dungeon item also takes advantage of the 3D environment. In this dungeon, you get the slingshot, and while using it, you view from a first-person perspective. Now you can gaze around your 3D environment, and at the time, it was a huge leap in gaming technology. The dungeon also introduces many new game mechanics like block-pushing puzzles, timer challenges, burning webs, and switches you have to hit with the slingshot. And then, there's the boss Goma. Up until now, you've been fighting spiders and tiny tree dudes, and it's all been pretty childish and youthful.
Get it?
But this boss is an indication that the world beyond the Kokiri Forest has much more sinister things in store. The next dungeon is Dodongo's Cavern, a fun introduction to bombs, and it's a little bit of a step up from the first dungeon. It introduces mini-bosses, and the fight against King Dodongo, while short and pretty easy, is a fun boss. Then there's Jabba Jabba's Belly. The theme of being inside the intestines of a giant fish is pretty cool, but in execution the place just feels really gross. It's easily the hardest of the 3 child dungeons, and while it's overall my least favorite, it has the best individual moments. Throughout the dungeon you have to carry the Zora Princess Rudo. A lot of people seem to hate her, but I like her a lot. She's used as a tool to progress through the dungeon, and using her to push down switches is an excellent idea. The dungeon item is really cool. It's the boomerang. It controls really well, and the boss of this dungeon is a great boomerang-themed boss. It's easily the best child dungeon boss. So with all that making this dungeon so great, why is it my least favorite? Because it's gross. Ew, the floors and walls are so squishy and... yeah, it's disgusting! Like I said, the idea behind a dungeon inside a fish's belly is a-okay on paper, but this whole place just feels icky. There's these stringy things everywhere in the dungeon, and I can't tell if they're parasites or little tissue flaps, and it all just feels gross. Luckily, the dungeons really pick up the pace when you go 7 years into the future. The child dungeons were mostly easy areas that you explored and, had fun in, but the adult dungeons are complex, intricate labyrinths. They have sprawling layouts, long and confusing corridors, boss keys, small keys, mechanics that can change the layout of parts of the dungeon, sometimes even the whole entire dungeon. The first adult dungeon is the Forest Temple, which is easily the best dungeon in the game, and my personal favorite Zelda dungeon. It's a perfect dungeon because it does everything it needs to succeed. Have a unique atmosphere and cool concept that is executed well? Check! The dungeon takes place in an overgrown haunted mansion, and the main objective of the dungeon is to capture the 4 ghost-like Post Sisters. And the dungeon feels like a ghost hunt. Take advantage of the items used in the dungeon and incorporating them into the dungeon's puzzles in a neat and interesting way? Check! The bow and hookshot are used excellently here, especially the bow. There's a couple of rooms where you have to use the bow in unorthodox ways, like a room where you have to hit an I button with an arrow, but it has to be set on fire by going through a torch, and you have to do that while on a spinning platform. Or when you have to shoot one of the ghosts in a painting, which also shows off a concept that's used in the boss fight. Have unique mechanics to the temple that change up the layout of the dungeon? Check! There's multiple times in the dungeon where you find yourself in these weird rooms that have stairs leading to the side of the room, or maybe a door that's on its side, and when you flip a switch later in the dungeon, the room falls on its side, and you can access those other parts of the room. Have fantastic puzzles and lots of interesting enemies? Check! I already mentioned the bow puzzles, but there's many other puzzles in this temple. There's a room where you have to climb up different levels and pushing blocks to clear the way to get to one final path. There's a room where you have to push blocks together to make a picture of one of the Post Sisters, and each block is a piece of the picture, and you have to fix the picture under a time limit. There's a room with a falling ceiling. There's a room where you push the wall and the wall rotates to reveal more rooms. There's a room where you drive a flaming motorcycle through a hoop made of knives that's also on fire. Plus, Link's blindfolded, and he's also on fire. No, I'm just kidding. That never happened. I mean, that would be cool, but that never happened. But the puzzles in this dungeon are just as cool. And so are the enemies. Like I said, the dungeon is like a ghost hunt, so you fight a lot of scary enemies. You find flaming flying skulls. You fight scary wolves that howl at you. You fight giant skeleton warriors. And once you find all the Post Sisters, you fight them in a cool mini-boss fight where you have to find out which ghost is the real one. Remember those child dungeons? You fought tree guys, lizards, and octopuses. Sure, in the adult dungeons you'll fight some of those guys again, but they're more powerful now. These enemies that you fight in the adult dungeons are real threats. One false move and it could mean the difference between being squashed by a giant skeleton warrior or going to live for another 5 minutes until you have to fight another giant skeleton warrior. Fantastic music? Check! This dungeon has some fantastic, chilling, atmospheric music that I listen to all the time. And an amazing boss fight that takes everything you learned from this dungeon and throws everything it has at you. Check, check, chiggity check. Phantom Ganondorf is a fantastic boss battle that utilizes the bow's abilities to a T. The first part of the dungeon brings back the ghost and a portrait concept from earlier in the dungeon, but it expands upon it. The boss arena is a small confined room that's covered in the same picture of a dark scary road that leads from a dark tower in the background towards the end of the painting. The first section of the boss, there are 2 paintings that Ganondorf will appear in, out of many in the room. In one of them, he turns around, and in the other, he comes out of the painting through a portal. You have to shoot the one coming out of the painting with your bow, and if you don't in time, he'll send an energy ball at you. The first phase is a perfect example of adapting a concept into its final evolved form. The second phase is tennis! No, literally, it's basically tennis. Once you've hit Ganondorf with the bow enough times, he goes to the center of the room and starts hitting energy balls your way, which you have to continuously hit back at him with your sword like you're Serena Williams. It's a cool phase, it's just not as interesting as the first. And that's the Forest Temple, my favorite Zelda dungeon ever and easily the best dungeon in the game. That's not to say that the other dungeons are bad. Basically every other dungeon left in the game is great. The Fire Temple is pretty fun, and while it's the weakest adult dungeon, it's got some really cool parts. The main part of the dungeon is breaking Gorons out of their prison cells. I really like how Ocarina deals with these moments of Link actually helping people. In most action-adventure games, you play through the whole game just killing bad guys and saving the world. But you don't really get to have a lot of moments where you are actually helping people in real time. But in Ocarina, it showcases Link helping these Goron people. It's probably the best part of the dungeon. The boss Volvagia is a fun game of extreme whack-a-mole, and the 2 main items used in the dungeon, the hammer and the red tunic, are used pretty well. The hammer is used to clear the path through the dungeon by destroying tiles in the floor and exposing new areas. The red tunic is used to not die when you're inside hot areas. If you go into the dungeon without the tunic on, you'll be crispier than a fresh piece of bacon on a Saturday morning in a couple of minutes. Both items are cool, but they aren't really used any other time in the game. I think it'd be cool if some areas that you found earlier in the game were too hot and maybe you could backtrack and use the tunic to enter the area, but it's not too big of a problem, just a bit of a nitpick. Then there's the first mini-dungeon of the game, the Ice Cavern. It's pretty cool and has its own little item, the blue fire, which is used to progress by melting ice. The dungeon is fine, but the blue fire doesn't tell you that you need more of it to free the Zora King, so that's kind of a problem. Some people might leave the cavern, and when they find the Zora King, they have to head back to the cavern to get more blue fire. And now people have been primed that the blue fire could also be used later in the game, which it isn't. But other than that, the dungeon's pretty okay. And at the end you get the iron boots, which are used to sink to the bottom of the water. Once you free the Zora King, he gives you the blue tunic, which allows you to breathe underwater. This tunic fixes the problem the red tunic had. Now you can go underwater, so some places can be fully accessed with this tunic. The next dungeon is at the bottom of the lake Hylia. So we head there, equip the iron boots and blue tunic, and head straight into the water temple. In 2009, Legend of Zelda director Eiji Aonuma sat down for an interview with The Guardian. This is what he had to say. The The water temple in the Ocarina of Time was notorious for being very tough to conquer. I am very sorry about that. I should have made it much easier to switch to the iron boots. I'm sorry about all the time you had to visit the inventory. The person in charge of creating the dungeons in Ocarina of Time had to apologize for a dungeon due to the amount of hate and backlash the dungeon received. In the water temple, the main mechanic is that you had to put on the iron boots to sink to the bottom, and then once you had gotten to where you needed to go, you took off the boots. To do this, you needed to go into the menu and select the boots, then click out of the menu. Many people who grew up playing this game seem to hate the dungeon because of this mechanic. And me? Yeah, I love this dungeon. The puzzles in here are fantastic. The item you get is great. It has fantastic music, a fantastic atmosphere. The iron boots weren't much of a problem, and the boss in this dungeon might actually be the worst in Zelda history.
You weak, pathetic fool.
Yeah, Morpha sucks. Sure, it utilizes the dungeon item well, but with the buildup of all the dragon statues in the temple, I thought we were gonna fight a giant sea monster, not some water that flails around. The Dark Link mini-boss has some great build-up, but once you realize that you can just destroy him with the hammer, it gets pretty boring. But the puzzles in this dungeon are fantastic, and it's a darn shame that the water temple doesn't get the respect it deserves. Next up is the bottom of the well, the second mini-dungeon of the game, but first, we need to go back to the child timeline. Since we're a child again, there's many items from the adult dungeons that we can't use. This always seemed like a weird choice, but the developers probably wanted the player to be immersed in the time travel experience. So we go to the bottom of the well in Kakariko Village. This place is filled with so many scary and dark elements. There's blood and skeletons everywhere. Basically every dark or scary enemy in the game is here. There's literally torture devices in this dungeon. It's terrifying. It even features this little room. Wonder what this is. This dungeon does something very interesting and unique to only this dungeon. You can leave the dungeon whenever you want. All you have to do is get the Lens of Truth item, and once you have it, no other place in the dungeon needs to be explored. It's a pattern break from the rest of the game, and I really like that. It also gets you ready for the second best dungeon in the game, the Shadow Temple, an amazingly scary dungeon that succeeds in both atmosphere and gameplay. A lot of people don't like this dungeon due to its linearity, but I love this dungeon because of its linearity. Every room is fun, every room feels atmospheric, and in every room I forget that the hover boots exist. Yet the dungeon item of the hover boots is pretty weak. It doesn't suffer from the problem people had with the iron boots, but the boots just feel underutilized throughout the whole dungeon. But this dungeon still has some fantastic moments. The silver rupee puzzles are all fun. The bomb basketball, while not required, is a good burst of fun. The atmosphere is truly dark and sinister. You fight that thing again. A flying boat where you fight the Stalfos is an amazing addition and is burned into my memory. All the torture-themed rooms are really cool. The maze towards the end of the temple is great, and this temple has the best boss fight in the game, other than the final boss. Bongo Bongo has literally given me nightmares, which is funny because he's a floating eyeball thing with disembodied hands playing the bongos. He's so fun. He's easily the best part of an amazing dungeon. Next up is Gerudo Desert, where you need to pass through the third and final required mini-dungeon. The Gerudo compound is an excellent appetizer filled with fun stealth sections and great combat areas. Like the Fire Temple, you get to free people from jail cells. It's a fun mini-dungeon and better than the Ice Cavern, but I don't think it's as great as the bottom of the well. It's a fun little warm-up to the next dungeon. Once you beat the Gerudo compound, you get access to the Gerudo training grounds. It's completely optional, but you do get the fire and ice arrows there, which aren't required to beat the game, but there is a room in the final dungeon that looks like you need the fire arrows. You can cheese it with the normal arrows, but it's still a major problem that people seem to have overlooked. Anyway, you head further into the Gerudo Desert until you reach the Desert Colossus, which houses the ancient Spirit Temple. The Spirit Temple is really interesting, because the first half of the dungeon you complete as Child Link, and the second half as Adult Link. The concept is cool, and I think it's executed pretty well. The first section of the dungeon feels like a mini-dungeon, because it doesn't have a traditional boss battle. It's filled with fun puzzles that you have to use your child items on. The music in the temple is great, having a real temple feel. This dungeon feels the most like a temple out of all the dungeons in the game. But overall, the first part of the dungeon is a fun, quick puzzle-thon that leads up to the best mini-boss fight in the game, the Iron Knuckle. This is where the combat system of the game peaks. I just love dodging this guy's attacks, and the whole fight is just really well made. Then there's the Adult House, which is even better. Some excellent combat sections, puzzle rooms, and easily the best implementation of a dungeon item in the game. The mirror shield is basically just the shield, except it can reflect light and other stuff. This item is used for some really fun puzzles where you have to move certain objects and stand in different positions to reflect the sunlight into the sun pads. It's a cool item used in fantastic ways, and right before the boss room you have to use the light to destroy a giant statue's face, and then you get to fight another Iron Knuckle. And then there's the boss fight. Kume and Kutake are Ganondorf's evil 400-year-old caretakers, and they're an excellent capper to an excellent dungeon. Their first phase, they fly around on broomsticks and blast ice and fire at you. A concept so cool that some weird game called Super Smash Bros. Ripped it off a decade later. So you use the mirror shield to reflect one of the beams into the other witch. Cool. It's really fun, though I feel like this boss could be a little bit cooler. Okay, so now they're hot. This is Twin Rova, the fusion of the witches, and she is hard. You have to block the energy blast with the shield 3 times. Then after that's done, use the built-up energy to blast her all to hell. Then go in with your sword and finish her off. This is an excellent boss fight that uses the item very well. Overall, an excellent dungeon that makes very good use of both Adult Link and Child Link. So, all the temples have been conquered, and now it's finally time to take the fight to Ganondorf. Ganon's Castle is an excellent final dungeon that takes a little bit from all the prior adult dungeons. There's a section corresponding with each of the dungeons you've conquered, plus an extra section. Each of these sections are like a mini dungeon. Each one either a series of quick small puzzles or one big puzzle. After you've conquered all of these sections, you travel from floor to floor, getting closer and closer to the top of the tower. While the previous part of the dungeon was all focused on puzzle solving, this part is solely combat, going through waves of enemies. This is all a warm-up to the great King of Evil waiting you at the top. I don't want to get into that final boss, because it's a fantastic capper to an amazing game that you need to experience yourself to be truly enjoyed. So those were the dungeons of Ocarina of Time. You guys still with me? There are a lot of them in the game, a lot more than an average Zelda game. I consider all of them to be good, and I consider the best ones to be great. If you want my rankings of the dungeons, boom, there you go. These dungeons contribute so much to this fantastic game. They also contribute to the fantastic story this game is trying to tell. And I think it's time we talk about that story. I think the reason Ocarina of Time resonates so much with people in their 30s and 20s is because of Ocarina's story and how it represents growing up. The people who first played this as a kid are adults now, and they're able to relate more to this mature and truly fantastic story. The game starts out in Kokiri Forest, a magical forest where no one grows up. You play as a young fairy boy named Link. Link is different than everyone else, and there's somewhere else he belongs. He doesn't follow the rules of the other children of the forest. He seems to be growing up. Sure, he's got people who care about him, like Saria, his best friend and fellow Kokiri child, but he's got a bigger destiny ahead of him. So Link goes to the Deku Tree and completes the first dungeon. Everything seems cool. You save the Deku Tree and the forest is restored. Oh. Oh no. This moment of pure shock is a dark omen for what's to come. You now have a quest to embark on, and you head for Hyrule Castle. So you meet up with Zelda and she gives you a task. Collect 2 shiny rocks from the Zoras and Gorons. And so, by clearing out the dungeons of these regions, you obtain not only these spiritual stones, but 2 valuable confidants. Darunia the Goron, who's now your official Goron blood brother, and Ruto, your new Zora fiancé. These two, along with Saria from the forest, are three very important people in your life. They teach you about friendship, family, and love. Three things that we are exposed to and learn about as children. So now that you've got the stones for Zelda, you head back to the castle and... Uh-oh! Looks like Zelda's in trouble. I must save her no matter what. Oh, new Ocarina! So you follow Zelda's instructions and go to the Temple of Time, put the stones in the pedestals, and play the Song of Time. A door opens, and behind it is the legendary blade known as the Master Sword. You go to pick it up, and... whimsical, charming, fun. These are words to describe the world you adventured through during the first part of the game. You were a child. You didn't know any better. You had no idea what was beyond the sanctuary that was childhood. You wake up in a strange place. A man with a long white beard and a long red cloak explains to you that you've been asleep for 7 years. The world fell to ruin after you opened the door and Ganondorf got in. And now he tells you that you need to save 5 sages. Whatever that means. And now you awake in the Temple of Time. You're now an adult, and you have a quest to complete. You walk outside to hopefully see the whimsical marketplace you were just in. To hopefully see dancing couples and laughing children and bustling townspeople. But it's worse than you could ever imagine. I think this drastic tonal shift clearly symbolizes the pain that comes with growing up. And sometimes when the pain is too unbearable, a darkness inside you can call out. In the depths of the Water Temple, the mini-boss is known as Dark Link, an evil manifestation of Link. And ourselves. Growing up is hard, and for some people it's so hard that darkness from within can take hold of you, and take you down, drowning you. Dark Link represents that darkness. I also think Dark Link could represent addiction, and how some people call out to that when they feel stuck. But to combat these darknesses in our lives, there are people to help us out in life. Throughout the adult portion of the game, you free certain important people called sages. Important people from your past. The forest sage is your old friend Saria. She tells you no matter what, she'll be with Link, helping him along the way forever. All these sages teach Link important things about growing up. Like I said, Saria teaches Link about friendship. Then Darunia teaches Link how, no matter what, you never turn your back on family. Then Rudo, your fiancé, teaches Link that, hey, maybe don't stand up your soon-to-be wife. Then Ampa, who you met once as a child, teaches you about loyalty, and how one must carry out their duties until the very end. Then Naboru, the spirit sage, teaches you about sex. Yeah, Naboru says some pretty sexual stuff to Link, but hey, that's part of growing up. Through these sages and their interactions with you across time, Link's taught about friendship, family, love, loyalty, and sex. All cornerstones of adulthood. And through these teachings, we become stronger, and are able to adapt to this new, harsher world we've been exposed to. We all have sages in our lives, whether they're friends, family members, idols, or maybe just a random stranger. We all have people that affect our lives and teach us how to survive. Once you've freed all the sages, it's time to take the fight to Ganon. And I'll stop here. The fantastic ending needs to be played to be truly understood and enjoyed. I know I've gone on and on about this game for a while, but let me just make a few closing remarks, and we'll all be on our way. After talking about Ocarina of Time for about 40 minutes, You'd think I have the answer to, is Ocarina of Time the greatest video game of all time? And honestly, I can't really say. First, you'd have to define what greatest means. Best quality work? No, I don't think that's what it means. I think it means most important or biggest spectacle, but it's a really hard to define word. Greatest. Is it the best video game of all time? No. I don't think it is. I mean, I don't even think it's the best Zelda game of all time. But I do have to recognize the impact that this game left. Not just on me, but on millions of others. And I think it's safe to say that this is the greatest video game of all time. Now, yeah, it has some problems, but I think the pros outweigh the cons so much. And it's truly an amazing game that, honestly, I can't do it justice by just talking about it. You need to experience it yourself by playing it. Whether it's on a 3DS, Wii, Wii U, or original N64. And hopefully if Nintendo starts to put legacy content on the Switch and start listening to their fans, you might be able to play it on the Switch very soon. But honestly, just figure out a way to play it, and you'll be able to experience one of the most magical, entertaining, and truly great experiences in gaming. Hey guys, Apology Meat here. Yeah, sorry I haven't been uploading in a while, but it was all worth it because this video is now out, and holy lord did it take a lot of work. Jeez, I mean, I've been working on this video for about 3 months. Yeah, 3 months. And it's honestly one of my proudest moments. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, like, subscribe, comment your opinions. And I also will probably be taking another break after this long video. Not only because, summer's starting, and everyone's probably doing other things, so also just this video, the burnout, and I feel like I haven't been getting enough sleep because I've been working on this thing for so long. Honestly, I just need to take a little break for about a month, so yeah. But thanks guys for waiting. Final messages, play Ocarina, apologize for being an idiot, and watch the Owl House. Bye!
Also follow me on Twitter.